Look at the weather.
It's beautiful here.
Non-stop rain.
Oh, man, it is a blazer out there.
It's cold and it's shivery.
It is cold.
Really coming down here.
I really enjoy your weather reports.
From the All Indiana Podcast Network, we're talking weather in a whole new way. From historical events to what's coming up, plus weather news, science, safety, fun facts, and more.
I like where this is going.
This is Weather Weekly. Weather Weekly with Wish TV Storm Track 8 meteorologist Marcus Bailey.
Welcome. Good to have you with us here again, episode number 32. So good to have you along. I am meteorologist Marcus Bailey from Wish TV here in Indianapolis. And how about it, gang? Fall is upon us. As the day that this drops, on a Wednesday, it is the first day of fall, the autumnal equinox happening. If you're listening to this the day of, obviously, you're listening a little bit later, then it's already well into fall. But we are going to start feeling a little more like fall, too. People have been kind of antsy for that. I love, this is my favorite season. I think I've mentioned this here on the podcast before. This is my favorite season. And maybe it's just because sometimes, in the summer, I just get a little bit... I'm over the heat and the humidity. Typically, especially in the Midwest, and I've worked my entire television career and weather career in the Midwest. You don't get a lot of active severe weather. You get some, but not a lot into the late summer months, right? You're usually very hot. You're humid. You can get some of these spotty downpours, but a lot of the summer, especially late summer, ends up running dry. I think I can probably think of more drought-stricken late summers in my career of covering things, whether it be here in Indiana over the last 6 years or Illinois, the 6 years prior, or in Lima, Ohio. A lot of late summers that just ended up running really, 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 really dry. And that was kind of the main story. So I get to a point where I'm like, let's move on. I'm done with the heat. I'm done with the humidity. Ironically, we pushed near 90 degrees this past weekend here, the last official weekend of the summer season. And it's interesting, at least as I'm recording this here. Now, I'm recording this on the Monday after, or Monday leading up to the podcast release, so September 20th. This will be released on the 22nd. So I went to date here on the average temperature for the month of September. I was curious. I would suspect that we're running pretty warm. I was right. So far, again, now this is not factoring in Monday's high temperatures, which were closer to average thanks to kind of some rain kind of moving through. But running through the very hot weekend, 72.7 was the average temperature, good for fifth warmest on record in September. Now, that number is going to go down substantially. We still have 11 days left for the month of September. No, I'm sorry, 10 days. So you're going to get a bit of a cool down, and I'll get more into this here in the extended at the back end of the podcast here. But we're going to see at least a couple of days in the extended that we only hit highs in the 60s. Your overnight lows are possibly going to be in the 40s. That's going to bring your average temperature down, and I think we probably remain below average for a long duration. So that's going to bring our number down just a bit from the 72.7 that we're at. I still think, that we're probably going to have a good shot of staying with an average temperature of the long haul above 70, which would be still cracking us in the top 30 for warmest. So an unusually warm September. So that was kind of our main headline. We finally did get some much needed rain, and we'll talk about that in the extended forecast here, but we've had nothing in terms of significance with severity of weather or flooding or anything like that. So we will get to the extended forecast as we're getting on the back half of the month of September, knocking on the door of October. Whew, crazy. Man, we're just flying by. Let's get to some national headlines before we get to our podcast subject of the day. Not a lot happening national or worldwide. Thought this one was interesting. It's not necessarily weather related, but it is definitely science related. Big volcanic eruption in Europe I don't know if you saw this or not. I did post a link to the initial article the day of the eruption on Sunday. This was in Spain's Canary Islands. This is from AccuWeather in combination with the Associated Press. After days of increased seismic activity that resulted in more than, get this, 22,000 earthquakes. The Cumbre Vieja volcano on the island of La Palma erupted for the first time in half a century. The Cumbre Vieja volcano on the Spanish island of La Palma erupted Sunday after days of increased seismic activity, forcing thousands to flee and spewing lava that destroyed numerous properties. The eruption began Sunday afternoon on the southern portion of the island, causing fissures to open, which allowed lava to burst into the air and trickle down hillsides and onto roadways. About 100 homes in an area of the island known for farming were destroyed by the lava flow, according to the AP. No injuries have been reported. The AP also citing the Canary Island Volcanology Institute says the lava was moving at a speed, get this, of 2,300 feet per second and was expected to cause explosions and clouds of acidic steam when it reached the waters of the Atlantic Ocean on Monday. The temperature of the lava was measured at more than 1,800 degrees. La Palma, has a population of 85,000 and is located within Spain's Canary Islands, which are located off the northwest coast of Africa. So far, about 5,000 people have been evacuated from the area around the volcano and lava flow. According to the AP, authorities have told some residents to remain indoors due to falling volcanic ash. I just can't imagine that. You just don't see volcanoes, erupting very often in populated areas. Obviously, the Earth's always got activity, and the Ring of Fire is something that, if you're a science geek, you're very well aware of. It's out in the Pacific Ocean. But a lot of those eruptions, they happen underwater. They happen under the ocean, right? That's where a lot of the fault lines and those kind of things are. So you don't often hear about anything. Obviously, we had some issues in Hawaii. It seems like it was probably like 6 years ago or so, 6 or 7 years ago, with eruptions there. So you don't see it in very populated places very often. But obviously an active volcano, said nearly half a century, that, you're talking 50 years, and, volcanoes don't necessarily have to, erupt every year, every 5 years to be considered, active. And considering you think of some other very well-known volcanoes, I think of Vesuvius as one of the ones that are considered dormant now. It's been, hundreds and thousands of years since the last time that those had any activity. So 50 years or less then doesn't really seem, in the whole grand scheme of things, all that long. But again, fascinating story, and you feel for those people that live there and now have to evacuate because of volcanic activity. We'll keep it on. I think the mind-boggling thing about all of that was what preceded it. 22,000 earthquakes in a week span. That's wild. That is crazy. Starting to get a little active right now in the tropics. As of recording this, again, on Monday the 20th, we've got two named storms of the Atlantic. We have Peter, which looks to remain out at sea. I don't see any forecasts that have really created any major problems for the United States or any of the assets there, any of the Caribbean islands. May have some choppy seas, but nothing more than that. Rose is also a tropical storm. Both of these storms are forecasted to move due north and are going to be out pretty much in the middle of nowhere in the Atlantic. So for now, no major problems, no mischief. We do have a disturbance just east of Newfoundland. Only a 10% chance of formation there over the next 48 hours. A 30% chance of a wave just off the coast of Africa. So it's east of Rose, west of the coast of Africa, kind of sandwiched there. That could become some more tropical developments. So we'll keep an eye on that. But so far, U.S. does not look to be impacted by much with any of those storms that are starting to get going. So those are some brief headlines here for this week of September 20th. So I got a good one here for you. This one just popped into my head, and if you're a weather nerd, you're going to laugh at the pun that I just made. I don't peruse it much, but I ran into a TikTok that has gone viral, and it was a guy. I don't think he was a meteorologist, but he got into discussing POPs. POPs in the weather world stands for probability of precipitation. You may well know these a little better by if you look in extended forecasts in many television markets, on social media, and on any given day, you may see a 20%, a 30%, a 40%, a 70% when there's a rain chance there. That is probability of precipitation. I wasn't real sure that what the guy said was exactly what, the definition meant. And so I've seen so many people share it, and there is a lot of confusion. And why I even bring it up more so wasn't just because of that TikTok went viral. There is a private group on Facebook that many of us television meteorologists go on and talk just about the business in general and share job openings, that kind of stuff. Somebody had brought this up, and what I found fascinating is you have nearly 300 some professionals there, the old and new, in this business. And everybody had different definitions for probability of precipitation. So I'm going to walk you through what the Weather Service says, what I've always said, and why I have never, and I'm very fortunate that I've worked at stations that don't force it. I have never used probability of precipitation on the air. I will explain why and everything you ever wanted to know about POPs. That's coming up next here on Weather Weekly.
Audible's romance collection has something to satisfy every side of you. When it comes to what kind of romance you're into, you don't have to choose just one. Fancy a dalliance with a duke, or maybe a steamy billionaire. You could find a book boyfriend in the city and another one tearing it up on the hockey field. And if nothing on this earth satisfies, you can always find love in another realm. Discover modern rom-coms from authors like Lily Chu and Ali Hazelwood, the latest romantasy series from Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, plus Regency favorites like Bridgerton and Outlander. And of course, all the really steamy stuff. Your first great love story is free when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
All right, episode number 32. This isn't going to be a super long one, but does give me at least a little time. 1, to explain something, and 2, to vent a little bit, all right? And 3, to explain why I do not touch this subject matter on television. Okay, so I previewed this a bit. Probability of precipitation. We know them in the meteorological world as POPs, probability of precipitation. This is shown, they do this at the Weather Service. If you go to weather.gov and your specific office, so for Central Indiana, if you go to weather.gov/IND, that is the Indianapolis office, you will note, and I will double check to make sure this is correct, but I'm pretty sure it is. If you click on Indy or any of your forecasted area, that they do POPs there. I'm looking at it for now, and they have, for now I'm recording this on Monday, all right? So we'll do our extended forecast here coming up. But for Monday night, they have 10% chance storms. For Tuesday, they have a 90% chance of rain. For Wednesday, they have 60%. Thursday, it's a 30%. Okay. Those are POPs. TV stations that I know several TV stations that will put POPs on theirs. We do not at Wish TV, never have. That was set in long before I got there. That was not a decision I made, but I was happy to oblige. And again, I'll explain why. Now, I'm going to try to go through this slowly because I'm going to throw quote unquote official definitions at you. What I find is there is no real official definition. It kind of depends on where you work. Okay, and I'll explain why here in just a second. Let me give you the quick and dirty one. So if you just look up on Google, what is POPs? What are probability of precipitation? This comes from the National Weather Service office out of Peachtree, Georgia. Okay, but this comes from a weather service, so this would be an official definition that they're putting out there. Here we go. Forecast issued by the National Weather Service routinely include a POP, probability of precipitation statement, which is often expressed as the chance of rain or chance of precipitation. And then they give an example in their zone forecast that you would see on their website, or you may hear if you listen to a weather radio. What does this 40% mean? If it were to say, this afternoon, mostly cloudy with a 40% chance of showers and thunderstorms. What does this 40% mean? Will it rain 40% of the time? Will it rain over 40% of the area? The probability of precipitation simply describes the probability that the forecast grid point or forecast area in question will receive at least 0.01 inches of rain. That's 1/100th of an inch of rain. So in this example, there is a 40% probability for at least 1/100th of an inch of rain at that specific forecast point of interest. Okay. Here's a bit of a longer definition, okay? This comes straight from the Weather Service here. Paducah, Kentucky. Comes in their weather education packet there. You can download PDF file, okay? Probability of precipitation forecast is one of the most least understood elements. At least they acknowledge it, right? It really is in the weather forecast. The probability of precipitation has the following features. The likelihood of occurrence of precipitation is stated as a percentage. A measurement amount is defined as 0.01 inches, 1/100th of an inch or more, usually produces enough runoff for puddles to form. The measurement is of liquid precipitation or the water equivalent of frozen precipitation. The probability is for a specified time period, i.e. today, this afternoon, tonight, or Thursday, etc. The probability forecast is for any given point in the forecast area. To summarize, the probability of precipitation is simply a statistical probability of 0.01 inches of more of precipitation at a given area in the given forecast area in the time period specified. Using a 40% probability of rain as an example, it does not mean, 1, that 40% of the area will be covered by precipitation at a given time in the given forecast area, or 2, that you will be seeing precipitation 40% of the time in the given forecast area for the given forecast time period. Let's look at an example of what the probability does mean. If a forecast for a given county says there is a 40% chance of rain this afternoon, then there is a 40% chance of rain at any point in the county from noon to 6 p.m. local time. This point probability of precipitation is predetermined and arrived at by the forecaster by multiplying 2 factors. Forecaster's certainty that precipitation will form or move into the area times aerial coverage of precipitation that is expected, and then moving the decimal point 2 places to the left. Using this, are you following along here? There's a lot. Using this, here are 2 examples giving the same statistical result. 1, if the forecaster was 80% certain that rain would develop but only expected to cover 50% of the forecast area, then the forecast would read a 40% chance of rain for any given location. 2, if the forecaster expected a widespread area of precipitation with 100% coverage to approach, but he or she was only 40% certain that it would reach the forecast area, this would as well result in a 40% chance of rain at any given location in the forecasted area, which again, that's a little bit different. It's a little bit more in detail of what we were talking about, okay? So obviously not very clear. Now, let me just kind of walk you through. If you go to Google Images and just type in probability of precipitation meaning, you are going to get a host of images of explainers that meteorologists from television have tried to explain. I'm looking at one right now. I am not going to name any stations, and I don't want to call people out because, look, I don't use this because people don't know what the definition is. So there's no right or wrong. This is not me trying to call out anybody, all right? Just in case somebody catches wind of this and they're like, wait a minute, that's my image. There is no right or wrong answer here. Basically, what I want to do is I just want to reiterate why it's confusing, okay? So, one graphic I'm looking at here, it's titled 30% chance of rain. Here's what it really means. He has a picture of 10 people, and, it says 30% chance of rain. So he's got 3 people on the left side grouped together. He's got 7 people on the right side grouped together. So, 3 out of 10, that's 30%. The 3 people says, why is it raining? It's only a 30% chance. They are never right. The 7 people are saying, why isn't it raining? They said a chance of rain. They are never right. So basically what they're saying is, it's a 30% chance of rain, and only 30% are, 3 out of 10 are seeing the rain, which is in direct contrast, right? Think back to the definition that they said. In fact, I think if you go back, if I go back to that longer definition I just read you, it says it in bold from the Weather Service. It does not mean, 1, that 40% of the area will be covered by precipitation at any given time in the given forecast area. So that's in direct contrast to what the Weather Service is saying. But again, the Weather Service was kind of giving 2 separate definitions there. So it's, what's right, what's wrong. This comes from the Weather Service. This is from the Northern Indiana office. What does a 20% chance of rain really mean? It's the likelihood of a measurable precipitation event. There's that number again, 0.01 inches at a grid point or a forecast area. During the indicated 12-hour period, the chance of rain is often called POP. We've already discussed that. Where does the percentage come from? Rain chances equals probability of storms developing times percent of area affected. In other words, 50% confidence of storms times 40% coverage equals 20% chance of rain. So theirs is a little bit closer to that longer definition, right? You've got that very brief equation. What POP doesn't tell you. How long it will rain, only a few minutes of rain may equal a forecast hit. Conversely, light drizzle for hours may not accumulate to 0.01 inches, which would be a miss. How much it will rain. The only accumulation constraint in the POP is whether or not 0.01 inches will occur. Thunderstorms are often rather spotty in coverage, meaning lower POPs, but produce some of the heaviest rainfall. Okay. So I think you're kind of getting my point. So this is essentially why I completely avoid POPs. And the way the Weather Service does it compared to TV doing it, it's different. And let me explain why. All right, so whether you are going to weather.gov and going to your specific area, just let's say, for example, Indianapolis, because that's where I work. So let's say you go to weather.gov/IND, you click on Indianapolis and you get your extended forecast and you go through that forecast there, and I gave you kind of the rundown of what it was saying. It's going to be a little bit different if I were to click on that 7-day or the extended forecast, say up in Muncie, all right? It's not a huge difference, but it's around, let's say, like I'm just looking at it now. I think I said 90% rain on Tuesday. It's 80% in Muncie on Tuesday. I think it was 30% chance of rain on Thursday. It's 40% on Thursday for Muncie. You would get the same forecast if you were listening to a NOAA weather radio, because they do what's called zone forecast, right? So you're clicking on a specific region and you're getting that. The problem is, Indianapolis DMA services basically the same areas. services the same areas as the Weather Service, from north to south, east to west, basically from the Illinois state line to the Ohio state line, down toward kind of Bedford, Seymour, North Vernon area to the south, up north. We're getting into north of Kokomo, up in like Miami County and some of those areas. So, and technically, we're on some of the smaller channels up in Fort Wayne and South Bend and up around the Chicago area. So we actually service, not on a 24-hour period, but service, at least for newscast period, a good chunk of the state. I think the only part of the state that we are not on right now is down around the Louisville area, the Evansville area, and extreme southeastern Indiana that's serviced by Cincinnati. So anyway, I'm kind of getting sidetracked here a little bit, but my point is just kind of paving the way for this is that we service a large area. It's not just one town. And the problem is, as opposed to what the Weather Service can do, whether it be via your phone, via the weather radio you have, or going on the internet, is you get a point-and-click forecast, right? So it's not a one-size-fits-all. I don't get that luxury on TV. And a 3 to 3.5 minute long forecast. I'm not doing extended forecasts for numerous, I don't have an 8-day forecast for Indianapolis and then follow that up with an 8-day forecast for Muncie, follow that up with an 8-day forecast for Terre Haute, follow that up with an 8-day forecast for Bloomington or Columbus. You get what I'm saying here? Because you see my point. Sometimes there'll be times where I'll say, and I use I-70 it ends up being a great dividing line right through the state. But interstates in general is a good line because they usually cut through a certain part of the state where you could say, hey, best chances are north of this interstate or south of this interstate, or you get what I'm saying. And so, there'll be times where, we'll forecast a chance of rain for the northern half of the state, and there may not be anything in the southern half of the state. If I'm showing an 8-day, though, the northern half of the state may include Indianapolis. And so if I'm putting pops on my 8-day, and I always say, look, slam dunk, northern half of the state, it's an all-out rain. I put 90% chance of rain on the 8-day and say that's for, Tuesday. If you live in southern Indiana and you're watching my forecast and you see that 8-day forecast, whether it be on the TV or whether it be on social media, or you go to our website and you see 80%, you're like, or 90%, did I say 90%? You're like, oh my gosh, I can't go golf today, or I can't do yard work. Better get that done now, even though it's miserably hot. It's all deceiving. I think there are better ways to get around it. I'm trying to get in the habit of showing probability of precipitation without necessarily showing probability of precipitation. Okay. And how can I describe this? It's hard to describe graphics when you're on not a visual realm here. We're trying to, when I'm trying to talk to you without actually presenting you with what I would show visually. But basically what I've been trying to get into the habit of doing, and I think it works well, because here's the thing, and this goes back, and you and I have had this conversation if you've listened to all of the podcasts here so far. We've had this conversation with communication, right? This is a communications business, and sometimes we overcomplicate the weather that should be so simple, especially during severe weather. But I think, you need to do it in inconvenient weather times too. There's always the joke of, the weatherman is always wrong, or I wish I could keep my job and be wrong half the time, that kind of stuff. That's an old adage that stems from many, many, many years ago, and it's not accurate anymore. Are we 100% correct? No, never will be. But certainly not like it was in 40 years ago when we didn't have access to the data that we have now. There's no internet. There's no way that we could describe the stuff visually with the graphics back then. It was basically magnetic boards, or maybe just like a grease board that, a weather personality was up there talking about. So, there are better ways to kind of visualize this, but still convey a message. So what I do is, for example, through our system, I can see the pops on there, and look, I do my own forecast too. That I can see each city, their probability of precipitation, and then what I would do is I draw my own contour lines, and I separate it into 3 categories basically, and we call it chances for precipitation. All right, probability of precipitation. I'm just trying to make it a little bit more viewer friendly, easier. Not trying to dumb it down, just trying to make it easier for the viewer. Chance for precipitation. I don't get into the nitty gritty of, this is the chances that you get 1/100th of an inch of rain. No, let's just say, hey, chance that you get some precip at all. And then I break it down into 3 categories. It's either slight, moderate, or likely. And I separate that by different shades of green. Obviously, lighter shade is going to be slight. A little bit darker is moderate. Super dark is likely. For example, this past Monday, if you're listening and you are from the state of Indiana, Monday was a soaking rain pretty much all day long. I had the entire state under likely, right? I had nailed that forecast. Felt pretty good about it. But you get to like Wednesday when this podcast drops, it was more, at least when I did the forecast on Monday, likely in the eastern part of the state, more moderate in the central part of the state, and slight in the western part of the state. And basically, if you would have looked at the pops that we were forecasting, you were kind of 20% in the western part of the state, but you were closer to anywhere between 60 to 80% in the eastern part of the state. Make sense? So, why we do that? So a big reason why I do that, and I guess why I have started to kind of trend this way. Futurecast, a lot of times we will show future radar, and it's dubbed different things in different TV markets. Futurecast, future radar, future scan, whatever their station, brands it, whatever. But all it is it's a model, right? And we've talked about how reliable or unreliable those can be sometimes. And so, you're losing the message here because people are only going to look at it for, look, 3 minutes doesn't sound like it's a long time, but you have to think of people's attention spans. And if they're not really into it, and all they really want is the basics. When's it going to rain? Can I come home and mow? Is it going to be wet for my kids at the bus stop? Is it going to be a wet drive into work? Do I have to cancel the outdoor birthday party that I have on Saturday? You get what I'm saying. The attention span for the people is extremely short, right? So you have to cater to that. You have to, we're weather nerds and we like to dive deep into the nerdy stuff, but most people don't want that. And that's what social media is for. That's what this podcast is for. I'm going to go on here for probably a half an hour or so about probability of precipitation. You think my news director would let me do that on TV and have like a half-hour segment for? No. Who would watch? But that's what you get all these other avenues for. But I do think there's better ways to handle how to forecast precipitation and still convey the message. And I think with the way I've been kind of trying to lean a little bit more, and I will still show Futurecast if I agree with it. There's times where, man, I'm just like, ugh, this is not conveying the message that I believe is going to happen. This gives me another avenue for it. And I think, and as we progress, I'm going to see how kind of people react to this, both on social media and on air. I think people get stuck in habits a little bit. And so some people like to see you run through a timeline on Futurecast. But I also think that there's some false senses there because, boy, those things update every few hours, and it's not gospel. When and I try to stop them, and I've always told interns, when you're showing Futurecast, you need to pause at specific times. Don't just pause just to pause. If there's nothing really crazy going on, my times I usually pause are going to be like 7 o'clock in the morning, noon, 5 o'clock in the evening. Why? What's happening at 7 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the evening? People are going to work and leaving work. Noontime, some people are sneaking out for lunch. So those are kind of the important time frames that you want to pause through that. So the map that I create that, mimics probability of precipitation, but kind of has our own wording, doesn't kind of give a timeline on that. And there's other ways to do that. But it gets you there at least a little bit, right? And you lose he said it was going to be a 40% chance of rain. And for most, they don't understand what that means. So that's why we completely avoid it for the most part, right? Now, like I said, I'm kind of stepping into the realm of, yes, I am using probability of precipitation, but not really using probability of precipitation. Or the average person would not know that I am using it. I don't put it on the 8-day. I don't say verbally on air, that's a 20 to 30% shot that you get rain. Right? But, with that graphic that we have statewide, slight, moderate, likely, it is putting us in the realm of pops, which I think can be useful, but you have to make it easily understandable for the viewer, the customer. That's who is watching right now. And if they don't understand, what's the point in doing it? And the problem is, it's not just the viewer that's not understanding. It seems like a lot of meteorologists just aren't understanding it. So if you are able to get a way out there to convey that message that is relatable to the viewer and they understand it, that's going to make you better off in the long run. That's what I'm hoping for. And that's why I kind of avoid putting probability of precipitation, in case any of you were wondering. So now you know what those percentages means and why many stations, including my own, they do not use probability precipitation. So hopefully that clears things up. All right, we will have that forecast, no pops included, with several rain chances here as we're going into the last full week of September. That's coming up next here on Weather Weekly. All right, here's a look at your forecast for the week of September 20th. And yeah, feeling like fall. Who's excited about it? I know some people don't like to get rid of summer, but it's time. And we're starting to see that transition as promised. September and October, a big transitional period. Had a big cold front move through here Tuesday into Wednesday. And so now, podcast dropping on a Wednesday, your numbers are only going to be in the mid 60s for highs. Still dealing with some showers in the wake of that front moving through. A low could get developed along that front, and on the back end, a few showers still hanging around on Thursday. Thinking is it's going to be awfully raw for Thursday, and I think it's going to be a chilly start in the morning. I've got numbers into the 40s in some spots Thursday morning, and highs only into the mid 60s. Now, we do bounce back nicely. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, back into the lower 70s. A real weak cold front on Saturday could bring a few showers, and it looks like we'll hang around into the lower 70s early into the week next week, and I don't have any major precip chances over the longer term there, deeper into the 8-day. But 6 to 10 day outlook, near normal temperatures as we start rolling through the next 6 to 10 days, precip below average. So despite kind of this wet start to the week, looks like we're going to be having several dry days to contend with. 8 to 14 day outlook, kind of on the outside edge of above average temperatures potentially, and precip for the next 8 to 14 days remains below average. And again, staying pretty quiet. Looking ahead, the October outlook is out from the Climate Prediction Center. Above average temperatures, pretty good shot for it. And it looks like the northern third of the state with above average precipitation. So we'll keep an eye on that as we are knocking on the door of the month of October. My goodness, I think, next Tuesday will be my last September podcast. And then we start rolling into the month of October. We are just moving right along. All right. Thank you so much for stopping by. I want to hear your comments too, whether it be about the subject matter, probability of precipitation, or anything about this podcast series. Love to hear your feedback. Shoot me an email, marcus.bailey@wishtv.com. You can reach me on social media as well. Marcus Bailey Weather is what you search for on Facebook. You'll see a good-looking bald guy in a suit there. And then Twitter and Instagram, Marcus Bailey, at Marcus Bailey on the Twitter machine. And I believe it's at Marcus Bailey also on Instagram as well. And you can message me there. Love to hear your feedback as we roll along with this series, and we're going to be doing some fun stuff. We got some good interviews planned here over the short-term course. One of my favorite ones anticipated. It'll be a renewed one we've had last year, but Mike Ryan, he'll be coming up here not too long away talking about his winter forecast. So we're getting there. Again, thanks again for stopping by here on this episode number 32. And while you're here, make sure to check out all the other great podcasts from my coworkers and friends, part of the All Indiana Podcast Network. We'll talk to you next week.
Discover more from Storm Track 8 Weather and Wish TV. Online at wishtv.com and when you follow Wish TV on Facebook. Plus, be sure to check out more great podcasts from the All Indiana Podcast Network now at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.